Hello, everybody. We are live. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Tonight, we're going to be discussing the medieval Playa haters. Now, if you're super cultured, you might get that the Playa haters is sort of a reference to the Dave Chappelle show way back when. And it was a sketch that they did where they had the Playa haters award show and stuff like that. So it's kind of what we're playing off of tonight. It is an annual award that we give during the annual EVA awards. We have the Player Hater Award, which generally goes to someone who claims to be a Christian, but just award is for. So we're going to talk about some player haters tonight. Is kind of the goal, and the beef between G3 Ministries and Right Response Ministries. What is it really about? Because I have a theory on what it's really about. It's not the most popular. Not a lot of people are really getting to the root of what really is going on. I think it's a lot more sinister or carnal, dressed up theology, when it's really not about theology, in my opinion. It's about something much baser. Not based, but baser.
Debased.
Well, I mean that in the sense of more so ego driven and stuff like that. We're gonna dive into that. Anthony is here to join us. He has read up on some of the material that I haven't even read for this discussion, so it'll be interesting to kind of see how. But if you are in the chat, welcome, and we'll be interacting with chat. We are live on YouTube, Twitch, Rumble, and Twitter, but you can't interact on Twitter. I'm just being real. So that being said, how are you doing tonight?
All is well. Another late night live stream, I guess. Long day.
All right, you got some background noise. So with that said, we're going to dive into the topic. We got a lot of tweets that we can look over tonight, but one of the I think I first want to start out with the Tom Buck tweet. Not that Tom Buck isn't one of the player haters that we're going to be talking about, but it is important to note that Tom Buck is part of G3 Ministries, and it's important to note that he is on their board. So G3 Ministries we've talked about a lot this year because quite frankly, they're if you look at their website traffic, G3 Ministries is Big Eva. If you want to, if we're looking at objective metrics like website traffic, they're Big Eva. If we're just talking about social media presence or YouTube, then they're mid Eva. But if we're talking about website traffic, which is one of the most important metrics, they are indeed Big Eva, and that is because they're not the Gospel Coalition. They're not as big as the Gospel Coalition, so they get called mid Eva. But this is where we're going to start out, is with the Tom Buck tweet, and it kind of sets the stage for what many people feel like was a deception. So Nathaniel Jolly asked that I post this for him. Please pray for our brother. And this is a direct. Nathaniel Jolly deleted his Twitter account, which is the context for this. He said, I deleted my post because Tom was correct. It was too sweeping of a comment to be made publicly. This is the only reason it was deleted, not because JMac or anyone else held the view, but because it was inappropriate to draw such hard lines in the issue. I deleted my account temporarily as I have been considering it for some time to focus on other things for a season. I may be back sooner or later, but for now, yes. So that is, we're going to start out, and that was an announcement that Nathaniel Jolly made, that he is deleting his Twitter account, which it was kind of already known that he deleted it, but then he had Tom Buck give the explainer.
Now, which tweet or activity preceded this immediately?
I actually don't know, because this is a question of which one.
Because I know.
So Nathaniel Jolly has had to make multiple public retractions. Let's just be real. And I don't know which one that's referring to, but apparently it got, Tom Buck involved. I don't know where Tom Buck is on this, they want to say that it's Christian nationalism. That's the driving issue, dividing, Medeva and people like Right Response, but I don't really think it's that. But I don't know where Tom Buck is on the Christian nationalism issue. I assume he's opposed to it, because he's kind of more or less letting them make the arguments for him, as far as I can observe. But Nathaniel Jolly, let's go back. Let's wind the clock back to, I believe, April. Let me check on the article that I wrote. Let's rewind the clock back to May. So remember the talk about loser theology and John MacArthur. So if we want to, wind back the clock, theology, Nathaniel Jolly was the person who set that entire debate off. He's the one that set that entire debate off. And why did he do it? Or how did he do it? How did he set that entire debate off? He set the entire debate off by...
Then he tweet the video out of...
He tweeted a video of John MacArthur
with partial context.
I would say no context, devoid of context, to make it seem like, the whole "we don't win down here," very out of context clip. If you play the entirety of the clip, and we did this video already on Evangelical Dark Web, titled "Does John MacArthur and Loser Theology?" It was a little provocatively named, but to make the point that he doesn't actually believe in loser theology.
Oh, nor does he believe in religious freedom, which
is in the same sermon. It's in the same clip. If you expanded the clip, John MacArthur saying that religious freedom isn't something that Christians should be fighting for. That Christians should not be fighting for pagans to be able to worship idolatry. Like, John MacArthur makes that comment in the same sermon. And that is something, a Christian nationalist could get behind. So is John MacArthur a Christian nationalist? Well, John MacArthur hasn't really weighed in on the issue. Not, necessarily like his right-hand man's opposed. But I also am, as a Christian nationalist, I really don't, just be blunt, I don't really care what John MacArthur thinks on this issue. John MacArthur does not have a good track record when it comes to civil government interposition and the doctrine of lesser magistrates. He has, since 2020, changed his position, and now they have a movie coming out about that. Which I've yet to roll back the clock to like 1989, where he's giving the police officers theological street cred, so to speak, to arrest pro-life activists. So, we talked about that with Sam Jones when he came on the channel. So those are just some things that are on the record. And John MacArthur has changed his views, and that's good. He's saying the movie was great. I saw it in theater over the weekend. Some people I know have been raving about it. I just haven't seen it. It's not like it's in theaters all around me. So I'm not entirely sure where to go. I'll also be interacting with chat on the Rumble sphere. So if you're on Rumble, don't be afraid to send chat. So just letting you know, we will be interacting with chat all night. So the Essential Church handling the COVID situation. And again, John MacArthur came out victorious in that. He is not a loser by any stretch of the imagination. And it showed in COVID situation. And not every church won. So he won. He got lucky and won, but not every church did.
Yeah, I mean, nor did small businesses. I mean, Attilas's gym, he didn't win. And I'm pretty sure he didn't win in multiple ways.
John MacArthur was very fortunate. He had some, I don't want to say he had the best legal counsel. Like John MacArthur had it at the right time because the Supreme Court ruled in John MacArthur's favor before, not on John MacArthur's case, but on the same issue. The Supreme Court had already, ruled on the matter. So California knew that they were screwed. They were legally screwed. That escalated to the Supreme Court. And they had to, I don't know how good of a lawyer Jenna Ellis is. Like if you were on Trump's election legal team, I don't really respect you as a lawyer. Rudy Giuliani, reference to him at the moment. So that's who. So Nathaniel Jolly has had a major impact on the evangelical debate in 2023. He's the one who set off this debate on John MacArthur in context. And then, when people label John MacArthur as believing loser theology, that's technically Nathaniel Jolly's fault because he posted that video out of context. And then people argued correctly that if that's that Nathaniel Jolly's offering loser theology, like he's trying to advance loser theology. Does John MacArthur believe in that? No.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's just believes
but Nathaniel Jolly, by taking that out of context, was what were you saying, Anthony?
I mean, MacArthur, obviously he's premill, and again, part of what's the problem is maybe the post-mills are very overzealous in their eschatology. And again, that's a legitimate complaint for those that might be detractors of Christian nationalism, is that it's too branded with post-millennial theology. And I think that is a hindrance from a sales standpoint. Like if you're trying.
Now, here's the thing. I saw a post the other day that was about how post-millennials are trying to, banish anyone who's not a post-millennialist as not a Christian. And it's like, what universe are you living in? So let's just do a quick fact check. Of all the theologies out there on end times, which one have you ever seen in a church faith statement?
I mean, I have seen premill dispy, pre-trib rapture too.
Dispensational premillennialism. That is the only eschatology that I have ever seen in a faith statement. So who actually believes that the eschatology is an issue worth dividing over? I can point to multiple churches around where I live that have dispensational premillennialism in their statement of belief. I have never seen a church have Amil or Hismil in their statement of beliefs. And maybe Doug Wilson's church is an exception. I don't know. I imagine Joe Webbon's church might be an exception, but I don't think he would.
Oh, he's 1689.
He's 1689, but
they don't have a eschatology in that.
So, which eschatological camp actually believes in dividing over this issue? Because that kind of deters, if a church has premill dispy in a faith statement, doesn't that deter people who are, say, mill from joining that church? I mean, theoretically.
Yes and no. I mean, again, because I know obviously you're talking about Maryland context, where Maryland, you're going to have a lot more disaffected Methodist people that grew up disaffected Methodist. Maybe they grew up Catholic, but they fell away and are rejoining the church. So if that's your audience, it probably doesn't make an impact at all. I mean, they might think it's weird if the church.
Right, but I'm premill dispy in their faith statements. Not all of them do, but enough of the ones that, don't otherwise fail a website check would have that in their faith statement. It's just one of those things. KL says, and just gives a fact check on it, and confirms what I was saying before. MacArthur did back the cops going against pro-life protesters. It was horrific. A pregnant mom lost her baby from police violence, and the cops snapped a brother's arm.
I mean, that's like the anti-Bible position too. Like, because again, I would argue under Scripture that your property rights don't protect abortion facilities. But,
yeah, I would agree with that, but let's
just
not.
Remember, the Republican,
I don't want to Fed post on YouTube or anything.
Just remember, the Republicans passed the FACE Act in Congress.
I mean, the FACE Act is blatantly unconstitutional and blatantly unbiblical. I don't want to get into Fed posting here, because that might be an article worth writing, though. Is and we get into the topic of vigilantism and stuff like that. So on the issue of life and protecting life. So moving on and just kind of getting back to the topic, because again, that's where John MacArthur was, and that's why a lot of politically minded or politically involved might be a more neutral way to put it, even or exception to MacArthur's positions on these issues. And the issues would be anything to do with the government, because he was very, and a lot of people in MacArthur's camp, Todd Friel would also be in MacArthur's camp, I would imagine. And Todd Friel was arguing if the government wanted you to wear pinwheels on your ears or something like that, it wasn't a sin in and of itself, so therefore you had to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Todd Friel also I think he also.
Whereas I think a more biblical position would be, if the government, you are entirely obligated to defy that. So they're assuming a power they don't have, and they're usurping God in doing so. So I would say that, yeah.
He also said that Kim Davis had to sign the gay marriage certificates. I think he
MacArthur or Todd Friel?
Friel.
So
I think he did that.
A lot of people in this camp aren't good at navigating politics. Now, John MacArthur's gotten good, I would say. Some of these people in G3, I think it was G3 that cited John Piper as a positive example of engaging politics, and is like, he's horrible. Like, John Piper's always been bad. He was advocating gun control and pacifism and stuff like that. But even move forward, he basically gave credence to Christians to vote for Joe Biden in 2020. In an article so bad that even Wayne Grudem came out and said that he was terrible for that. That's just the history of that. So Nathaniel Jolly deletes Twitter, but he's been very influential in the Christian conversation in evangelicalism. But he deletes Twitter, but then he posts this. And I don't know if you have the Facebook page open, but I guess I have it locked and loaded. It's just, I don't have a Facebook account, so it looks ugly for me to pull it up. So 7 doctrines ruling the world. Nathaniel Jolly posts this on Facebook. So he quits Twitter. There's an implication that he's repenting, and a lot of the Christian nationalists are like, okay, do we celebrate him leaving, or do we say, hey, this is a positive development, or we should dunk on him? And there's kind of that discussion. I kind of stayed out of it. And then this happened a couple days ago, where he goes hard in the direction of a conference that they're putting on. It's all about the conferences. So he posts 7 doctrines for ruling the world. And that's in quotes, because I guess it's a reference to the 7 mountains thing, which we'll get into a second. Folks, regardless of what you think of the individual men in this conference, you need to understand that this type of mentality is a worldly one, and therefore detrimental to your spirituality. So let me actually blueprints for Christendom 2.0, 7 doctrines for ruling the world. It is the Right Response Ministries Conference. It is Doug Wilson, Brian Save, right? Joe Boot, Joel Webbon, Michael Foster, and Dale Partridge, who's actually, and it's like they're trying to make this conference seem a lot more controversial than it actually is. But to be honest, the only controversial name on the list of guests, not for anything related to Christian nationalism, it's because his whole seminary ordeal, where he wanted to, I think he's claiming to be a founder of a seminary, but doesn't even have a bachelor's degree or something like that. So it's like academic suicide, stuff like that. So that's why that guess would be controversial, and not more controversial than, say, Doug Wilson. So I'm going to zoom in. We know the liberal drift desires to rule the world. But is this the view Christians should have? Is it our job to scheme, twist, and garner political activist type support in order to fashion the world in our image? Did Jesus take over Rome? He certainly could have. Did Paul advocate for political activism or rising up against Rome? No, but he could have. Did a single apostle focus on? No, they focused on the gospel. I'm not saying we aren't involved in all areas of life. Don't hear what I'm not saying. So I actually want to pause right there.
Well, can we just point out the fact that, a lot of historians will even say that Christians took over Rome. So it didn't happen in Jesus' generation, but it happened hundreds of years later through exponential growth.
We'll get to Rome in a minute, or in a moment. We'll get to Rome later, who definitely hates my guts. That we'll get into. So we'll put a pin in the Rome conversation. But as far as political activism and stuff like that, we don't have a full exhaustive detail of what the apostles did. And it's also worth noting that, yes, the Roman government was an overlord, but you considerably do now. We have larger governments. We pay more taxes than they did in Roman times. So we are in a different age. You maybe paid 3% income tax in Rome. Now, you might not have had disposable income, but you might have paid 3% income tax. We pay north of here in the United States. So that different ball game, different areas of government. There's a reason why, a Christian might not be involved in politics in ancient Rome, because first of all, it's not a representative system, or at least it barely was, if, depending on whether Rome still had a Senate or not.
No, still it would have been more patronage and style, where you have to have a wealthy patron that would then sponsor the clients.
Right. So you would have had the Roman patronage system. You wouldn't have needed to advocate national policy, and there wasn't the medium to do so. So it's kind of a nonsensical comparison to have insisted that they would have had it. But if you're a Christian involved in civil governance, what then do you do as a believer? And it's you advocate for Christian policy. So the 12th apostle being Matthias, Judas. So make no mistake, these men will use Christian language, and scripture will be used, but even the devil used scripture to tempt Jesus. So don't be fooled by Christianese language. No, I'm not saying these men are a devil, but I'm suggesting many of their teachings are very worldly and not sound biblically. And again, I'd like an actual argument here. The whole thing about did Paul advocate political activism? That's a truism. That's no argument.
It should be noted that that he hasn't actually presented an argument, and he's going solely based on the conference title or the
Yes,
subtitle, not their
and
actual
the people
teaching.
involved. I mean, Doug Wilson, very controversial because, is he Reformed? Is he Calvinistic? And all this other stuff. Get myself interested in it because it's just, personality drama, and I'm not really interested in that stuff. We are diving a little bit into personality drama today because this stuff does impact the evangelical conversation. And we're going to talk about what mocking is in a second. And, whether Joel Webbon was mocking in his response and whether that would have even been wrong if he were. So we're going to talk about that. But the thing is that these on into sermons that people who have no idea what their pastor's talking about hear, and it has an impact. So there's going to be a bunch of innocent laymen who are subjected to pastors ranting about their online frivolities and their Twitter beefs.
In Homer, Alaska, of all places.
Yeah, in Homer, Alaska. And you saw at the Southern Baptist Convention, Todd Unziker's sermon fair, but his motivational speech at the Southern Baptist Convention was exactly that. It was, let me air out my online Twitter beefs to a crowd, to a captive audience, because they're my captive audience. And I have an ego. And that's basically what's going to happen. And I don't think it's becoming of pastors. You probably listen to more Joel Webbon sermons. Listen to any recently or anything?
Probably been a while, but I was listening to his response today.
Does he do Twitter beefs in his sermons?
Generally, no. It'll probably be
I mean, I think he'll
Pilgrim's
teach.
Progress or something a little bit more.
I mean, you know who does go into their Twitter beefs in a sermon? Beth Moore. So that's a good sign to say that's not, you're not supposed to do that. So anyway, like button, because that really helps with the live stream algorithms, and subscribe if you're new. That really helps with the algorithms as well. That's the best thing for algorithms on YouTube is to subscribe. Hands down. That's my observation. So that's it. The simple truth is this: the Christian has a task to do given by God, and it is not to rule the world. It is to spread the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. Jesus in Matthew of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to keep all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. This is the commandment from Jesus. So who will you listen to? A bunch of men or the Lord Jesus? Now, again, he's erroneously pitting the two against each other. Because, again, the Great Commission is not the only commandment that Jesus gives the disciples. He's trying to pit Christian ethics against the Great Commission, and it's not a real argument. He does not say go conquer the world, rule the world, or take over the world, become political activists. He says go make disciples. Furthermore, concerning the idea of ruling this world in any form or fashion, the Apostle Paul G of this world. 2 Corinthians 4, verse 3 and 4. And even if our gospel is veiled, it is veiled to those who are perishing, in whose case the God of this age has blinded the minds of the unbelieving, so that they might not see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. So that's where we get the term, biblical term. You have anything to say about this section?
I mean, it's the glorified Jesus juke. I mean, the idea of you're using Jesus to avoid their actual, you're kind of just invoking Jesus to avoid the actual argument.
Yeah, he's not actually engaging their arguments. He's just engaging the title, ruling, seven, was it? Seven doctrines for ruling the world. Actually, the doctrine. Now, is it provocative? And that's the subtitle. He's not actually engaging blueprints for Christendom 2.0. He's engaging the subtitle, not the actual title itself. So, Satan has been given limited authority in this world for a short season. We don't rule this world, Satan does. And beyond that, God is ultimately gave Satan some freedom, but he is nothing more than a dog on a chain, and God is still his master. God is in absolute control, which is why we can be at peace concerning the events of our day. We take courage because we don't have to figure out a way to rule the world. God already has it all figured out, and God is the ultimate ruler. We merely want to be faithful. Don't become political activists, become gospel activists. I gotta say, like, God's the only one who can change hearts.
I mean, he's right in that. In his theology, he's still a little off base in application because you're talking about being faithful, but you're not saying, again, you're not saying the political realm falls under being faithful. So he's still disconnecting political activism from being a faithful believer, as if you can't do both.
Well, again, it's the mentality that if you're, that's kind of the mentality I get out of this. Like, I'm a pastor, therefore I'm doing my part. You're not a pastor, therefore you're not doing enough. That's the thing that I'm getting out of this.
Yeah, I mean,
and
obviously
this is a pervasive mentality in evangelicalism. You'll hear Joe Webbon talk about why this is a wrong theology or mentality to have. John Harris has also gone off on this being a bad several times in their videos. So that's the mentality that I get from that. And I've heard that mentality, I believe, also from Virgil Walker, and it just kind of grades me the wrong way. Because the civil sphere does matter. And people who have authority in the ecclesiastical sphere, and there's nothing wrong with having authority in the ecclesiastical, but they're treating the sphere as the highest authority on earth, which possibly is true, maybe in a spiritual sense, but in a temporal sense, it's not. So the other spheres do matter, and they also matter for the spreading and the advancement of the gospel. So we'll get again, we're going to talk Rome in a second, but of an elitist Nathaniel Jolly here. So if you want to become more worldly, follow these. If you desire to stay fixed on the task set before us in Christ, namely the proclamation of the gospel of Christ as that which is above all most important, then stick to the Bible. I have no doubt that many will call me divisive or say that I'm attacking brothers, but that simply isn't the case. I just gotta, yeah, he's lying here. He is definitely attacking
trying to
brothers.
say I'm not doing it, but there's but that simply isn't the case.
We all have, he continues, we all have blind spots and weak areas of doctrine, and my aim is to address the faulty beliefs and not attack individuals. I pray that these men come to see the error in some of their thinking, but in the meantime, I advise anyone to simply not travel down the same road as these men in this area of the local church, and trust in God in all his sovereignty to do as all that he pleases. That is enough for faithful Christians. Really? What about start a family, raise a biblical family? He's only talking about the ecclesiastical sphere.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing if you're
All of that is doable in the ecclesiastical sphere. It's not doable in the family sphere because he didn't mention child rearing. It's not because he mentioned nothing about being a good citizen. So, man, he doesn't even get into personal repentance, which is in the self sphere, because self governance is a thing, self control is a thing, and then he concludes, and this is where very shady. If you haven't read my G3 article that addresses some of this more specific, humbly commend it to you, and I think that his article makes the same thing. But then he goes on to advertise G3 Ministries. So I kind of take issue with, again, you're trying to dunk on brothers, and it's all to advertise your own personal pet project, which is G3 Ministries. So, elitist mentality that kind of gets me the most in that. I'm going to pull up Joel Webbon's response. But if you have anything to say about that.
Oh, no, go ahead with the response. Because, I mean, again, it's the article is pretty much the same. It's kind of a glorified gospel juke. I mean, he kind of invokes Paul in front of Agrippa in Acts 26, which is more Paul giving his testimony. So, yes, his testimony is multifaceted, but there does seem to be a perception that you can only do, you can only have one motivation for anything you do. You can't have multiple motivations that are both good.
Multiple goals in mind that are both good.
Yes. Paul is before Agrippa to give an account of his life, but also to defend his honor and his actions. He is basically contending before a judge, and then the judge, based on hearing his story, no, he doesn't believe in the gospel at all from the context of Acts, but he does basically say that he hasn't committed a crime.
So to add on to that, if you look at the letters that Paul writes, a lot of them defend Paul's own honor. And that's not wrong. So it's interesting that Paul gets a little autobiographical, especially when he talks about all the suffering that he's done for Christ. So he gets a little autobiographical. People like this might argue that Paul's being self-serving if you want to apply this mindset, but it's not self-serving. Paul can give an account on his own life and still be advancing the mission field. So let's pull up Joel Webbon's response, which got a lot of people upset. A lot of people were upset by this. Special announcement in honor of our brother Nathaniel Jolly. We're hosting a next 24 hours only. You can register for our conference at 20% off. Registration and he gives the website. Just use Jolly for the promo code. Be a Jolly Warrior. And he posts a screenshot of the Facebook post that he improperly. This is my biggest problem with the post, actually. He improperly cropped that image, and by not cropping it at all. So that's actually my biggest beef, is he did not crop the image.
I mean,
to him for this. Owen Strand might be the biggest hypocrite in this, because I believe it was Canon Press last year did the same little gimmick that Joel Webbon did with Amy Bird and the It's Good to Be a Man book. So they used Amy Bird as a promo code for the book after she came out and attacked it. So Joel Webbon just did the same play. People are calling this unbecoming, Owen Strand specifically, but a lot of people in that camp have an issue with this tweet. I honestly can't see the issue with it because I don't even think this rises to the level of mocking.
I mean, your last name's Jolly. Let's just put that on the table.
Well, it's a play on the joyful warrior. So I don't see the issue.
I mean,
Nathaniel Jolly came out and attacked your ideas, attacked your location to some degree. Don't travel down there. And you can't use his name as a promo code. I don't, where in the text is that?
I mean, this is literally a turn the other cheek moment. If we're actually gonna,
I don't even see this as mocking. He's taking the hit in stride. Promo code, even if it is a little bit backhanded, a little bit passive aggressive, which is what turning the cheek kind of is. It's kind of passive aggressive because you're basically saying that hit didn't hurt me. But in the cultural context, you're basically saying you hit like Will Smith. So that's the cultural context of turning the other cheek. And that's kind of what Joel Webbon did. He basically said, hey, it didn't hurt at all. And to me, there's a larger point about this, and it's about turf. Like, I really don't think it's about anything bigger than that. It is about, right response ministries versus the MacArthur bros, because the MacArthur bros, I think Joel Webbon has said something along these lines, but I've been saying it independently. MacArthur's not going to be around forever. As far as I know, he's in good health. No reason to think that, we don't have like a stage 4 cancer diagnosis, which we had for Tim Keller. So you kind of knew that was coming. You don't have that with John MacArthur, as far as I know. He's had a couple health scares in the last few years, but other than that, everything about people posturing and jockeying for position is all speculation, because there's no reason to think that John MacArthur's other than going to pass away anytime soon. He seems to be in good health and still gives good media appearances and looks good doing it. So when someone else comes along and kind of upends and comes around the system, that's perceived as a threat in my view. Because he's targeting the same audience. Like Joe Webbon is G3 Ministries, and that is Reformed Baptist. Right?
Oh, yeah.
So this brings me to a tweet by Fred Butler. So I tweeted out that I had my own tweet on this, but we'll get to the Fred Butler thing. So let's get to the Fred Butler tweet. So actually, let's read the Rhett Koppel tweet first. So here's the thing. Right Response Ministries was intricate in the statement on Christian nationalism and one of the many names involved. He was one of the biggest. He's one of the biggest platforms on YouTube. That's a little bit of an exaggeration. He's gotten huge though. He came on this channel in the beginning of the year, he had like 24,000. On top of that, since G3CN controversy, Joel's platform has exploded. He is massively cynical about the whole affair. Is the reason giving for not wanting to meet with the guys and hash out the differences was memes, which themselves were responses to jokes and bad faith engagements. Now, after being told they will be ignored, these guys, especially Joel, have been on the receiving end of endless accusations. He's calling Nathaniel Jolly the Midiva B team, Once Joel responded with a promo code named after the worst offender, Nathaniel Jolly, Joel was hit with an unbecoming accusation. You should be able to do the math here and make a plausible assumption about what's going on behind the scenes in private chats. We aren't being ignored while being told we are being ignored. Smear tactics and political in the politics of guys that should be allies, but absolutely don't have to be. Joel has been far more patient and charitable than his accusers deserve. And Joel responded to that with a thank you. Okay. So I honestly think, and we'll get into the Fred Butler question, that I honestly think it's effeminate to get offended by the Joel Webbon tweet. I think it's effeminate to get offended by that. I think it's unbecoming to a jest. Like there's mockery up here, but and jest down here. I don't even know if it comes up to a jest.
And your name is Jolly. I mean, we just got to reiterate that. Like, if he played football, he probably got, dogged by the coach for having a last name Jolly. Like, again, sometimes you're stepping on a rake, and it's even funnier.
I mean, a quality name just helps you out.
But the other thing is,
by it, and I would think that you're more in sin for your. I think it's arguably more of a sin to performatively offended by Joel Webbon's reaction with the promo code than it was for Joel Webbon to do that. I think the performative virtue signal is far more sinful, arguably. And I'm not even sure if that's a sin, but I think it's far more. I think the argument is far more in favor of that being a sin than the promo code. Because the Bible virtue signaling and vain, empty gestures of offense. So, okay, so we're getting that the stream is cutting out. Is it just the every 20 seconds or so? Is YouTube being mean to us?
I don't know. I've been having issues all night.
I know Anthony says that he's guys are saying like every 20 seconds or so. Oh, maybe it's Restream having some issues. So let's read this tweet by Fred Butler. Fred Butler is a very faithful soldier to the MacArthur Bros. You might count him as a mid-Eva B team. I don't know. Let's step back for some perspective. The right response YouTube to this writing, that's a lot. That's a lot. The Medieval Boomer Cons at G3 has 68,000 subs. I don't know when G3 started. I think G3 is a decade old. So I don't know when their channel started. I don't know when right
but their
responses ministry started, but it's got to be newer.
Should also be noted that G3 also more long form, I think, in content. Though they don't have Apology up here, which is like half.
Yeah, Alpha and Omega might, I don't know. So he asked what's mid-Eva. So there's Big Eva, like the biggest evangelical organizations, and then they say mid-Eva as a pejorative. Mid-Eva encompasses not only not as big as big, popular slang for mediocre. So it's actually a really good double entendre. So G3 has 68,000 subs. G3 affiliated ministries, affiliated meaning individuals speaking or who have long-term historic connections to the ministry, which I think is a little bit broad. I think that's a pretty broad brush he's trying to pay. So He is, okay, in the text, I believe is what that stands for, 43,000 subs. Justin Peters, 205,000 subs. Heart Cry Ministries, 248,000 subs. Who's Heart Cry Ministries? Is that also Justin Peters?
I don't know that one off the top of my head.
Alpha and Omega Ministries, 102,000 subs. Grace to You, 753,000 subs, which is John MacArthur's. 662,000 subs, though folks will quibble that AIG affiliated G3 ministry and Ham is speaking this year.
I would quibble with that if you're including that, because I mean that's apologetics content, so it's not even in the same ballpark or swim lane.
Okay, but isn't there that, what's that Christian conference that's being hosted at the Ark?
That'd be cross politics.
Okay, maybe. Okay, so yeah. Heart Cry is Paul Washer. Thank you for the live fact check. That's what I thought it was. So Cross Politic, Christian Nationalist Camp, is having their ministry at Ken Ham's place, which is the Ark. Pretty boss location to have a conference there like that. Why aren't more Christian conferences at the Ark? I actually wonder that. Anything. With that said, though they don't have a YouTube channel, Daryl Harrelson and Virgil Walker do have 146,000 subs. Not subs. Followers on Twitter, combined with their Just Thinking podcast, which has hit #1 on Apple Podcast. I mean, what category? That probably matters. While large numbers are necessarily smoking gun proof of platform viability, those numbers do show that people, I could look at video views, but I don't have time to review. They have proven the faithfulness of their platforms. As of this writing, the statement on Christian nationalism still says it's in the draft stage. Okay. But the note affixed says that it was to be complete mid-July, which with a one-day conference to follow after. I take it that the statement is near completion. I don't know if that conference has actually happened.
I haven't checked on that.
As to the criticism of the Christian nationalists, like they're pointing out troubling aspects of one position, like the concept of 7 doctrines for ruling the world, promoted by Reconstructionist post-Millers, is virtually the same thing as 7 Mountains' mandate of the Hogwarts School of Prophecy NAR crowd. But both are rather worldly wise and man-made, born out of one's favorite eschatology. That's still not slander. Can we talk mandates?
So I'd like to first.
Okay.
I'd like to first know what the 7 doctrines of ruling the world are before we start saying that overlaps 1-to-1 with 7 mountains.
Okay, so let's talk about 7 mountains, right? So my understanding of this, maybe it's not correct. Maybe my understanding isn't correct. But let's talk about what the 7 mountains are. I believe it's family, politics, education, entertainment, the church. What's the other one?
I'm pulling it up.
So I just named 6 of them, and maybe entertainment was 2.
Family, religion, education, media, entertainment, business, and government.
So media and entertainment are 2 separate ones.
Yes. Which again, I think that's just, I mean, it sounds like you just chop it up in 2.
So my understanding is that what they're good at, every believer should figure out what they're good at and own that space and climb that mountain. Now, the 7 mountain mandate might have come from a bad place. It might not be super airtight because, like I said, entertainment and media are kind of the same thing. So I'm not sure how you differentiate between the two? Oh, I think like sports differentiating factor because you're not really in media if you're in sports, although that's less true than it used to be. So that in and of itself isn't anti-biblical. It might not be it might be extra biblical, but it's not anti-biblical. It might be helpful, it might be unhelpful, but I don't think it's antithetical to the gospel to say that people should figure out what they're good at and own that space. All people mean by seven mountain stuff, then that's biblical. If I think you know the Bill Johnson crowd is a lot more intricate than that. But if that's all that Christian nationalism resembles, that Christians in politics should do politics biblically, that Christians should start entertainment circles to compete with Hollywood.
Yeah, I mean, it should be noted that where Bill Johnson and his
Christians should start media companies to get that's unbiblical. Now, Bill Johnson, his strategy is we're just going to slap a Christian label on things.
Well, it should also,
we're going to have a school of coding, the Bethel School of Coding.
With Bill Johnson, he does basically believe that the Seven Mountains mandate can bring about the second coming of Christ. So I think that is an important distinction.
Okay.
So it is eschatology in nature, or eschatological. So that's one thing.
Okay, so it is eschatological.
But I mean, obviously, if you use it as more of an idea or springboard, I mean, again, there's a difference between using it as a mission statement versus just as a springboard. Because again, I could just argue you can.
So there's a starting point in the theology, but there's an ending point in that theology that doesn't necessitate that the starting point doesn't necessitate that you have to go to.
Yeah, but I mean, if you really wanted to, you can make it 5 mountains, or I mean, again,
7's a biblical number, so they
yeah, and it's also mountains of Rome, so there's more
7
symbolism.
So that's kind of my thing. Like people throw the 7 mountains thing to kind of discredit Christian nationalism, but it's like the 7 mountains part, the first step in that idea isn't bad. If you're trying to use that idea for a post-millennial eschatology, then you're wrong. I just think you're wrong. I think I'm not a post-mill guy.
I mean, it's more so as long as you keep it more in a sociological lane, that's fine. Again, it's not my thing, but
yeah, Christians build. I don't think it's wholly unbiblical in a limited use capacity, so to speak. But there's probably a more biblically airtight way to word it that Bill Johnson that's better than what Bill Johnson could do. So those are my thoughts on 7 Mountain. Again, my understanding of it may be limited, but if we're just saying, hey, these are the 7 mountains that Christians should dominate, I don't see that in and of itself is a false gospel like these people are trying to make it out to be. So his platform, but a solid platform takes time to grow. To have any lasting value, several years of consistent, sustained ministry, it must be built upon solid content, quality material, tested character of the builder. That builder will most certainly come under fire from critics. He has to expect criticism, and it is lazy to dismiss all pushback, bad faith arguments, memes. Took a lot of effort. So those are my thoughts.
So. I mean, you're talking about having these arguments on Twitter. So I think that's one of the problems that they have is you're trying to say that if you just respond with bad faith arguments, or he's basically saying, hey, you guys are dismissing our arguments with memes and claiming that they're in bad faith. So
you froze. Response to this. And I want to go through that response. Let me actually response. And this response got a lot of traction. I said half the people that you mentioned use John MacArthur's platform to build their own brand. Joe Webbon built his own brand with no astroturfing. Let's be real. This is really about not following the proper channels.
I mean, it should also be noted that Joel Webbon.
So that was my boom hot take.
Well, Joel Webbon left, but he left a brand that he could have rode.
He did,
because he was Acts 29, so he left.
Okay, but how big was he in Acts 29?
Probably not that big, but still.
Was he just a follower in the ranks, or was he actually writing articles on their website or something?
I'm saying he could have rode that platform.
Yeah, he could have, but he didn't.
So that is to his credit.
So it's like, so let me go through these. I want to go through these names. So let's just fact check these. So let's start out with Fred Butler. Is he connected with John MacArthur's brand? Yes. And stand a text. I'm going to say that's a no from that. Or sorry, let's start G3. Did they ride John MacArthur's brand? Yes. That's an undoubted yes. And all the people, a lot of the main figures affiliated with that text, I'm going to say that's a no. Justin Peters, I'm also going to say that's a no. So that would take out these two ministries, which is kind of ministries. I'm going to say this one's a no as well. And then this one's a yes. Grace to You, obviously, is a John MacArthur brand. Alpha and Omega is not. Neither are the Justin Peters ministries. And then Answers in Genesis, I don't think that's a G3 affiliated ministry, if we're being honest.
Yeah, I mean, Ken Ham's been around.
Daryl Harrelson and Virgil, that's a John MacArthur astroturfing, so to speak. And that's the end of the names that he lists. So 1, 2, G3 is a lot more than one name, and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, G3 is a lot, and then G3 is a lot more. Fred Butler, obviously. So a lot of the names he listed clearly built their brands off of John MacArthur's brand, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I really think that that's what this is about. So when all these people are jockeying for position because they're morbidly trying to be the top dog once the crown passes, they want to be the successor. They want to be the crown prince, so to speak, the crown Christian prince. They're jockeying for power. And then you have people like Joel Webbon. John Harris would also be in this category. These people who make memes, they are circumventing the Big Eva infrastructure that is in the John MacArthur camp. They're not rising through the ranks of G3 like Nathaniel Jolly. And maybe that's why Nathaniel Jolly is really angry these days, is because he's going through G3 and GTY to build his brand, to grow his amplified voice, to build his online ministry. And all these other people are not doing that. They're doing it on their own.
I mean, it does go down to how much opportunity cost has the people at G3 and Nathaniel Jolly. How much opportunity cost is there in him going after Joel Webbon when he could be trying to just do his own ministry? I mean, how much hours is he putting into writing these articles?
Do what?
Do his own ministry and do his own mission. Like, instead, you're wasting a lot of your time and resources with infighting when you could just be doing your own thing. I mean, Joel Webbon wrote a book. He published his book, so he's been doing that. And again, if you don't agree with his approach, that's fine. I mean, I have quibbles with fight, not flight, but like, again, I appreciate what he's bringing to the table as far as a conversation.
Have you read the book?
No.
You've not read the book?
No.
Okay. I'm thinking about getting the book, but I don't know. We'll see. There's a Russell Moore book as well, which I might do a review on one of these days. So, and then there's my own book that will eventually be coming out. I'm just terrible at the whole post editing process. So we're going get to that soon enough, and then I need to actually go. That was
use
just
Jolly as your promo code.
Maybe I'll use Jolly, or no, I'll use Michael O'Fallon because he hates me. Anyway, let's go back to the bookmarks, because let's talk about Rome for a second. Let's talk about Michael O'Fallon, who's definitely a big Eva guy. He has been doing cruise ships and stuff like that of directors, and he had to resign. And I think it's one of those situations where he was not going to last longer. This happens in the business world all the time, where you quit to avoid being fired. I think it's one of those types of situations. Now, I don't think it was the same situation for each of the ministries that he resigned from, but I do think it was that for G3 because he was causing some issues. He tweeted this out. While the Chi-Rho has been used for various reasons in Roman Catholic history, it was the sign that Constantine and his troops had seen before battle. It is used today by integralists like the Josiahs and also by Josh Abatoy of New Founding and an American Reformer. So he name drops two brothers in Christ. There's Josh Abatoy and Nick Fisher, who are behind New Founding and stuff like that. So I got some issues. So now we're going to talk about Rome, and I got some issues. If I'm correct, the cross is what Constantine saw in the vision or the dream. He saw the cross, and then they painted the Chi-Rho on the shields. And they won the Battle of Milvian Bridge. Very important battle in history. Milvian Bridge. So not super caught up on I haven't watched a documentary on Milvian Bridge in a while. So with that said, I gotta say that this is a funny instance of friendly fire, because the Chi-Rho symbol is also the symbol of, or the logo of, Pirate Christian Radio. Chris Rowe is very anti-Christian nationalist. He thinks we're all racist. So I think it's a little bit of a funny instance of friendly fire. But nonetheless, there's also the continued straw man that Christian nationalism is Roman Catholic integralism, which is not true at all. Like, these are completely different ideologies. Christian nationalism doesn't require a specific type of government. The thing is that it requires a civil magistrate government to be submitted to the Roman Catholic Pope. So that's my understanding of Roman integralism. Like, it has to be submitted to the Pope. Correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, or Anthony, if you're familiar.
I mean, that's always been the fear. I mean, that was certainly the fear in like the colonial times. It's that too many Catholics would be loyal to the Pope, not to the people, I guess, or the populace.
Yeah, not to the. So that I think this was the nonsensical player hating tweet by Michael O'Fallon. It got dunked on a lot. Someone said, have you considered the Jerusalem cross, which is the cross behind me is called the Jerusalem cross. It was championed by the Crusaders of the Prince Crusade, the first crusade, that is. And they conquered the Holy Land. Back to the Eastern Romans, because the Eastern Romans kind of betrayed them. So a lot of interesting history surrounding the AIDS. And he got ratio for this, I believe. So good day for Michael O'Fallon.
I still don't even understand what's wrong with using the Chi-Rho, other than that it's old and nostalgic, maybe.
Yeah, I don't get what's wrong with that either. I mean, so I think that's all of the tweets that I wanted to share tonight. But one of the questions that needs to be asked, who's our front runner for player hater of the year? Is it Nathaniel Jolly? I think he might deserve it. Or is it like Scott Annual or Josh Bice or Virgil Walker or Fred Butler or Michael O'Fallon, who's kind of on the nomination for multiple awards? That'll be a fun award show at the end of the year. And I think Nathaniel Jolly is a current frontrunner. I will put it to the subscribers to evangelicaldarkweb.org. If you're a Patreon-like subscriber at evangelicaldarkweb.org, I'm going to put out a poll, and you guys have the honor of doing the vote on that. So there's your incentive to subscribe. So anyway, I think that kind of says G3 platforming pro gay atheist James Lindsay, thumbs down, thumbs down. And yeah, they were pretty instrumental in using him. And you know what's ironic is that they're still getting labeled Christian nationalist. Even Michael O'Fallon is still being labeled a Christian nationalist by people like Russell Moore. You're never going to escape the label, so you might as well.
He's also a fundamentalist.
Also, James Lindsay. Again, he's not actually anti-woke, which is the ironic thing. He's just woke from, 10 years ago, maybe 10 to 30 years ago. That's his level of wokeness. He doesn't believe in gender as a fixed binary. So he's woke on gender, or he believes that gender and sex are at all. Not prior to the advent of gender ideology. Then Pastor Michael Grant says, definitely think RR, right response, CTM, conversations that matter, and 80 Robles are on the right side of this fight. I agree, and I'm definitely on that side with them because I think they're looking more forward to the future. I don't think they're as concerned with jockeying for position. I think they're actually a lot more collaborative. That's why I like, here's the thing about discernment ministries. We are very collaborative with one another, even though we're direct competitors. Look at Protestia. They are like 5 to 10 times my size on the website angle. Not on YouTube, but on internet websites and even social media like Twitter and stuff and Facebook. They're like 5 to 10 times our size. But we work together. We're friends in this fight. Collaborative. And that's what I like about this. It's very collaborative. People like John Harris, very collaborative. They don't view people as threats because they're direct competitors. They actually view them as natural allies. And part of the point that I can't remember whether it was Joel Webbon or Rhett Koppel's tweet that made the point that we should be natural allies. And that the other side is leading people to hell. And over something that's a non-essential issue.
It also should be noted, since like masculinity is a huge thing now, and like and Virgil Walker will I've heard him talk about like Andrew Tate and the rise of Andrew Tate, the rise of the manosphere, and obviously we did the live stream. And if the church, if the church wants to keep infighting against the Christian nationalist types, because Michael Foster, I think, has a book on the subject. I think, again, several of these people have books, and several of these people are trying to be the generation that leads up strong young men. And you got G3 basically saying, don't do that. And then we're going to ask ourselves in a couple of years, where are the men? Where are the strong men that we need in this society to fix it? It's just like, well, you're basically, striking at them for trying to do something.
Or you're telling them only be pastors. So I think there's some of that as well. So I don't think that's a recipe for winning. So if we're ready to move on, if you have comments in the chat, feel free to mention them. I do want to touch on some other happenings in Christian news, some happenings that we haven't done videos on or podcasts on. So I think they're still worth talking about. And one of the things was the street preacher arrested for preaching outside of a drag show. I didn't do a video on this because I didn't really have the exclusive stuff to do a video on it. Like Ben Zeisloff, he's a good guy, an ally in this fight. He was the Daily Wire reporter that wrote about The Chosen, and then The Chosen dunked on him. Jeremy Boring dunked on him, and then he left and got a new gig at the Sentinel. And he's just crushing it over there. Like that website had smaller traffic than him. I don't know how they had the money to do that unless they had some investors. And he's going to take it somewhere, I think. So we had that. This was an event in Watertown, Wisconsin, where some young Christians were stepping up. They were at a protest against the transvestite pedophiles who were performing in front of children. And then they got arrested because the police would rather defend that than condemn they would rather arrest Christians and defend degenerate behavior than enforce laws against lewd acts in front of minors. So I think that's a story we should touch up on. You have any comments on this story? Or
I mean, it's very similar to the one that happened in Pennsylvania. And again, the cops. It's similar to the one that happened in Pennsylvania, where the cops were basically just defending more degeneracy rather than actually either A, defending the rights of the people, or B, stopping the pedophilia from happening.
And then at the movies church services, I wrote an article last night just calling it totally unbiblical, and Protestia has done most of the reporting on this, but they haven't done any video content on this. Compilation video. I'm going to do a compilation video of like the cringe fest going on at these churches, and hopefully make it funny and snarky and all that other stuff to point people to the fact that this is wrong, try to shame people into leaving a mega church for a more biblical church is the goal that I think I have in mind, because the people in these churches, not assume that these people go into these churches like Life.Church, and I always call it Life.Church because they always spell it Life.Church. So that's why we pronounce the dot, because they always have the dot. So Life.Church, if you're going to Life.Church, I shouldn't assume that you're a Christian. And I end the article by saying the megachurch at the movie's liturgical calendar event is ear-tickling cringe. That's kind of the thought process, is this whole trend needs to get shamed out of existence. Now, I don't know. I don't think shaming it will work, but we can shame their numbers. We can't really shame the churches. I think they're beyond correction. But we can shame the people, because I have more hope for them than false teachers.
I mean, I will say I didn't realize how common this particular theme was. Like you expected out of the Church of the Glades in Florida, or even like a Mike Todd, to do these kinds of eccentric stunts.
I believe Life.Church is the church that started the whole at the movies trend. So they started it. A lot of churches do what Craig Rochelle does. So whatever Craig Rochelle is doing, they're going to do. So I mean, he has the Bible app, the YouVersion Bible app. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was Steve Dace gave my article on Seacoast Church. He posted that, and I gotta say thank you for doing that. Really appreciate the traffic we're getting out of that. For sure, we're having some pretty good days after some not very busy days on the website.
You didn't get anything on Facebook.
No, actually, not true.
Really?
Facebook had about 5 times the traffic that Gab gave us, and then Twitter had the most. So
I was gonna say that post looked like it was shadow banned. I mean, he does look.
So
like
he posted the link on all the socials, Twitter. He did. So yeah, you said that he looks like he's shadow banned on Facebook.
He is absolutely shadow banned on Facebook.
And yeah, that's probably true. But despite that, it still gave us some traffic. All things considered, Twitter gave us the most because he started last night and he was getting a lot of engagement because he was dealing with Rudy Giuliani and stuff like that. So I got to give Steve Dace a shout out for that, for promoting my article. It's good to have big names promote my stuff, especially article to impact the presidential election, and to hurt Tim Scott's campaign. I'm going to be real that I want that guy's campaign to fail. I think it's very creepy that a 50-year-old plus senator is unmarried and claims to be like, and speaks evangelical and stuff like that. It's like you're not living the base trad life. You're not. Frankly, you're not very Black Lives Matter as a senator, and you go to a partially gay affirming church. I think this should sink this. I want this to sink his chances in Iowa specifically.
There's a reason I call him Token Tim, because he's the embodiment of Republican tokenism.
Exactly, and you see a lot of that in Big Eva. Like, why is Brandon Watson
Benjamin
being promoted? The dude is
same thing with Tony Dungy.
I think there's a little bit more to Tony Dungy. Tony Dungy at least was at least a leader of men. So he has something. I mean, being a tight end in the NFL, okay. You were in the NFL, and then the skin color thing, like that's really why Benjamin Watson's promoted. I wrote that article in part to hurt Tim Scott's campaign. I also did it to expose Seacoast Church as well, because again, very prominent mega church, and the search engine optimization, I think, was what helped that article a lot. That article did all right on its first day, but has since, taken off. So very big update on that front. Maybe I'll get featured on maybe the article will get featured in the show, because again, I don't really care how many people. To some degree, more is who reads it. You want to be read by people who are, first of all, your target audience and the people that can impact more people, so to speak. So G3, very influential because pastors read them. Or the Gospel Coalition. Why is the Gospel Coalition so influential? Do they write articles that are useful for common people? No. But pastors read the Gospel Coalition. So, therefore, they're far more important than you realize. So, those are just my thoughts. Any other final questions in the chat? Or, Anthony, if you have anything else to say?
No. Pretty much touched it. And you're hoping the Wisconsin people get some money out of it.
Yeah, and what about money?
Hopefully they get some money out of this arrest.
Yeah, against the city in Wisconsin. Like, I certainly hope they do as well. So it definitely seems like that's kind of everything that we came here to talk about. So otherwise, I do want to let you know you can support Evangelical Dark Web at evangelicaldarkweb.org/join. That's our Patreon-like system. And it's like Patreon. I'm going to be doing a poll on the player hater of the year so far for this the Patreon-like supporters. We don't use Patreon because they censor people, so we built our own. And we'd appreciate your support. We have an upcoming book that we're going to be releasing, hopefully in the fall. I know I wanted it out in the spring, and then summer's already passed, but we're going to get it out. And then we got some upcoming live streams that are pretty exciting. We got Stephen Wolf on next week. So we're going to talk his book, The Case for Christian Nationalism. We're also going to talk controversy interview, hopefully. And we have a live stream at the end of the month, which should focus on politics and the first debate for the Republican primary. And then we'll see what we're doing in between there on the 17th. So we got plans for days. I'm going to check on the Rumble sphere. I don't think we have any live chat on Rumble. And I guess that's it. Have a blessed